Video is live.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Regional Services Committee meeting of Wednesday, September 22nd, 2021. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge we are on the traditional territory of the Coast Salish peoples. And with that, we will move to the first item on the agenda, Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The first item is approval of the agenda.
Okay, the motion approved. There's move seconded. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Oh, Director Morrison? That was just approved. Okay. Oh, go ahead. Oh, you're all right. Okay.
The next item is adoption of the Regional Services Committee meeting minutes of July 28th, 2021.
So you're cutting in and out. Just try that once more.
The next item is adoption of the Regional Services Committee meeting minutes of July 28th.
Okay, could I have a motion moved, seconded? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. So the next item.
No business arising and no public input period, so I will move on to delegations.
All right, thank you.
Item D1 is Cindy Lise, Regional Facilitator, and Denise Williams, co-chair of our Cowichan Communities Health Network, with an update on activities of our Cowichan Communities Health Network, including findings determined by recent updates to the CCH profile and for information.
Great, and welcome Ms. Lise and Ms. Williams.
Thank you. Thanks for having us. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Denise Williams. I'm the Child and Youth Programmer here at the Cowichan Community Center, and also the co-chair of the Community Health Network.
Great.
And hello, everyone. I'm Cindy Lise, and I'm the Regional Facilitator for our Cowichan Communities Health Network. And I would like to start by acknowledging the traditional territory in which we reside by saying it's a skapip atanagwayal tani atu Cowichan tamauch, and that we are gathered here on the Cowichan land. We have a short presentation, and Denise is just getting us loaded and sharing her screen.
Perfect, thank you.
There we go. And next slide, Denise. And so the vision that we see for our communities at our Cowichan is that all people in the Cowichan community enjoy good health and well-being. And then how we get there is that we facilitate the discussion, we act as the conduit for information, and we are the catalyst for action on the 12 key determinants of health. So we actually now have over 70 diverse partners that come together and meet bi-monthly, where we hear from spotlight speakers, delegations, and where we learn from each other on key issues that inform our actions. And it's also a place that we come together to celebrate our successes. For the past 10 years, we have been a non-funded function of the Cbrd. And that's where the Cbrd holds our bank account and provides the financial services for a grant that we get from Island Health. And the facilitator, which is myself, am actually a contractor of the Cbrd. We're overseen by an administration committee that ensures the financial accountability, the strategic direction, as well as oversees my facilitator deliverables. And in Cowichan, we either lead initiatives, we co-lead initiatives, or we partner with others in the region.
Helps if I unmute myself. The street sweeper was just going by, so sorry about that. Our network consists of community members, organizations such as the Division of Family Practice, seniors organizations, the school district, local governments. It's a great example of diverse partnerships. We represent 0 years to the end of life, health, education, local, provincial, and federal government, as well as community partners and those with lived experience. We are community-led and have over 70 diverse partners at our health network. We have cross-sectoral partners engaged in initiatives throughout the valley, which you can see here. We're data-driven and have a 3-year strategic plan, which helps us to not only respond to key challenges, but create priorities that are important to our community. We facilitate collaboration using collective impact, and our support in grant writing has brought millions of dollars into the region for a variety of organizations. What we have built over the years in Cowichan, other communities and community health networks are working towards, so we're a great model for them.
So this may be a little bit difficult to see on your screens, but this slide encapsulates who we are and what we do. And so in one corner, there's the Pathways Regional Community Service Directory that we support, that you can actually go on and find out anything you need to know about Cowichan. Through our community action team, we've been responding to the opioid crisis and saving lives through education, awareness, harm reduction, and community collaboration. And this photo in here is actually Sonia Firstino, who is a member of our Cowichan, and Chief Seymour getting naloxone training. We keep our diverse network together, learning, engaged, and contributing to the health and well-being of citizens, and that has been particularly important throughout the pandemic. Our network has engaged in regional planning, such as the Regional Childcare Plan, the Airshed Strategy, official community plans for communities, Cowichan 2050, the new hospital development, health and care planning, and poverty reduction strategies. And many of you will remember us through the colossal effort that it took to lead and get us the housing service that we now have in Cowichan. There have been extensive efforts for the underserved community that have been undertaken through the Cowichan Vision for Community Wellness. And then we've been able to put that into action with the COVID Emergency Shelter Task Force with many community partners. The small community dignity villages have transformed lives. Residents' negative contact with the RCMP, bylaw, and local businesses have diminished, while health outcomes have improved immensely as a result of shelter from the elements, nutritious meals, wraparound care, and health services. And the residents have significantly reduced their substance use, and some of them have gained employment and moved into independent living. I would be happy to share more about that project with you, and I'm sure you're aware of much of it. But it's also really important to note that this is for the folks who have been served and housed, and that the narrative is not the same for those who remain residing on the streets. We've engaged in the pandemic response, connections, task forces, and planning that continues to take place as this pandemic continues. And as Denise said, we have supported hundreds of thousands of dollars in grant writing and planning. And that includes the recent Ubcm Service Enhancement Grant in the amount of $2.5 million to ensure that the supports for those who are underserved have the ability to transition to supported housing. And I see that Gretchen's going to be joining you after from Cowichan Hospice, but you may not know that our Cowichan actually provided the first small grants for community dialogue and awareness videos that were the catalyst that resulted in the multi-million-dollar hospice house. We supported that task force. We did fundraising and communication with the community throughout the journey of its building. And while some of the small grants result in projects such as the hospice house, you'll see a tiny little photo in there of warm sweaters and hats. And that's our Handmade Hugs project that quietly provides clothing for children, youth, and adults in our community who are in need. We've been at the helm of the Housing First for Youth initiative for a number of years, and we continue to bring together community leaders to address vulnerable youth and youth homelessness. And the photo in the middle at the bottom is of the Cowichan Tribe's cold weather shelter for youth. And yes, we have homeless youth in this community. We've also been at the helm of EPIC, our elder care project in Cowichan, which is a collective impact initiative ensuring that seniors in the region have the care and supports required to meet their social, emotional, and health needs, and to keep them living in their homes where the best care can be provided. And this year we created 10,000 packages of community information that were handed out, and some are still to be handed out while seniors get their vaccines.
We pay attention to the data and the needs of this region and bring leaders, those with lived experience in our community together to find best solutions. We don't always come to the table with the same beliefs and values or purpose, but we do find a way to hold space for everyone and have a kind of dialogue and planning that helps move us forward. These next two slides are from our community health profile. So an example of the things that we provide, the information and data for everyone via our health profile, which you can find on our website. This document is for you, our community, and our organizations. We use it to help us understand where we are in relation to the social determinants of health, for planning, advocating for resources, and for the data required for grant writing. Here are some of the resources, such as the health profile, our year-end report, our presentation that we're sharing. Our doors are always open to you, and if you wish to become a part of our team at the Health Network table, many of our community initiatives that we lead and support are started there. I invite you all to come to our next meeting, which is in November. If you're interested, please let Cindy or I know. And
Well, thank you very much. Very interesting to see all the range of things you're involved in.
yeah,
And,
so just a couple more things. We obviously know that the health and well-being of our community is a shared responsibility. So in addition to questions that you may have for us, we would like to ask you a question. And it's not for money, like most delegations are, although we don't have any. So if you know of a little pocket of some funds, please let us know. But we would like to know if this information is helpful to you guys, if you want to know this stuff, the stats, the stories, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and how you want that information. So would you like us to present on a yearly basis to the boards, to different committees and whatnot? So thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much. See speakers list starting right up here. So I saw Director Wilson first, Yanni DiNardo, Smith, did I miss Nicholson, and Marsh? Okay. I'll just answer first though. Yes, I think annually would be great. And I did notice you have the weekly newsletter, which I did not know about. So I'll point, we will make note of that. Maybe send us all that email afterwards, Cindy, if you could. I think that would work to the board email.
Absolutely. And just for your information, that weekly newsletter, it's my way of communicating because you could only imagine what crosses my desk in a week. So I pull it all together into one document and I fire it back out again so that it can be disseminated broadly. And so in regards to us sending you information, it's also a place for you to send us information that you would like to have disseminated throughout the region.
Perfect. Thank you. So I will turn to Director Wilson first.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Denise and Cindy. It's very informative. The work you guys do, I know, is really very welcome and useful in the community. I think one of the key words that you've used in your presentation is supported housing, and it's the supported part that really interesting, because that support is what is needed more than just housing alone. And it seems to me that without that kind of support, it's highly probable that failures, as we've seen in some cases, may occur. So I wonder, is there a plan to provide that kind of associated support service, or is it basically, here's the housing, take it? It's the support that I'm asking about here. That to me is the most important part.
And the answer is yes, support is a number one priority. And what's been fascinating is the vision for community wellness that was able to be put in place and trialed during COVID with the small dignity villages really works. And they work because they have the support. And so our efforts to continue to find the kind of funding, and when I'm saying I'm saying our as in multiple community partners. And we have Mayor Staples here that co-leads the task force for the COVID housing projects. But it also includes our local partners and service providers and Island Health. And we've really come together as a community. We are working together. We have relationships. We know each other. We are doing joint funding applications. And that's what it takes to be successful. And supporting, yes, as long as we can continue to get the funding that we need to make it happen. And even then, we are dispersing and sharing the workload of the agencies in helping the underserved population. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Director Yanni DiNardo.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Cindy and Denise. I just wanted to say that annually would be great. I think these presentations are good for us. We have so many things coming across our desk as well, so it's nice to sort of see it. I do get the weekly, but it's nice to have it pulled together for us. And also, I do remember, and it was great for you to remind us, Cindy, I remember Rob Hutchins coming to a meeting and speaking about his aunt years ago in a hospice house in Vancouver. And from there, it just went. And I do remember that clearly, and that was a few years ago. So it was so great to see his vision come together. So it was fabulous that way. But thank you for that reminder, because I often wondered if we did remember Rob in that. So I haven't heard much of that. But the airshed. So I do sit on the airshed group, and I wondered where we are with that, and if you can give a little bit of detail on that one. Thank you.
So the Airshed Roundtable, part of the challenge has been funding, and I was actually just contacted this week, believe it or not, that there is a small pocket of funding for coordination. And our Cowichan has been stewarding that initiative. So what that means is that the role that I play as the facilitator, I help keep the multiple community partners together. And that all of those partners continue to do the work towards improving the air quality in Cowichan. And that we have the opportunity to come together a couple of times a year, as well as supporting the leadership team. So we didn't have money. And I believe that there's a small pocket that's going to be coming to the Cbrd, and there'll be a discussion about how that little pocket of money is used, whether it's going to be the health network that continues to steward the collaborative coming together, or whether it's going to look a little bit different. But we've just this week, Lori, got information that there's this tiny little bit of funding to continue the efforts to move that forward. And with that said, COPD in Cowichan is still higher than almost any other region in the province. And we cannot lose sight of why the Airshed Roundtable is so important.
Thank you so much. Thank you for all you do, both of you. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Director Smith?
Thank you very much. Through the chair to Cindy and Denise, I must admit I always find the meetings extremely informative. Many of the details by the presenters are broken down for us to have a better vision of where they're working and how they all coordinate together. One of the things that I think about the program that is you've adapted through COVID-19. I mean, here we were all left out, and then all the groups were obviously in need, and there you were. You pulled us all back together and brought us into meetings virtual, and everybody was able to attend. That made it really helped everything move along, because I think so many groups all of a sudden felt like they were in silos as soon as COVID hit, and that they were left out there and they needed assistance, and you guys were there to really pull it together. So I do admit I love coming to the meetings. I've come away with like so many things in my head that I feel like it's like, oh my gosh, this is happening, and and I love the newsletters. I would like to thank the board or the chair of the board for having me on that group, as I find it very beneficial, and I think it's very important for us as the CBRD to have attendees from especially the electoral areas. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. So next I have Nicholson and then Marsh and McGonigal. Director Nicholson.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Cindy and Denise. I definitely would echo what other directors have said. We should be hearing from you at least annually, reporting out on what you've accomplished and what you're planning for the next year. I would just like to stop and speak a little bit to you about how much I value the work you do in terms of bringing people together and doing things differently. So we have so many complicated issues in our community, and the only way we are ever able to actually make progress will be by working in partnership. So I think organizations like our Cowichan, I would also say the Cowichan Watershed Board, the purpose is really to bring people together and to attract funding and get the job done, coordinate things, is absolutely essential. And the other thing that I really think is important is that it's data driven. So I commend you for keeping those 12 determinants of health top of mind. And I would add, my one question I think is, do you do like an annual report card for the Cowichan on where we're at with those, so that we can monitor things over time? Thank you.
We don't do an annual report card, but that's essentially what the health profile is. We've done it twice in every 3 years now. So, and you can see some changes. Unfortunately, there's some things that haven't changed at all. So there is things like the vital statistic reports and things like that, but they cost so much money to do that it's just not feasible to do. So our health profile is every 3 years that we try to do it. Unless we get funding, we won't do it again, but we do have 2 of them now, and the stats are there to be able to see how things have changed or not. And we do have Island Health at the table as well that we often can pull some stats from. So if there is something specific that is of interest, let us know and we can try to pull something together.
And also we have Social Planning Cowichan that has done the snapshots. And so we work in conjunction with our community partners. And so the health profile is a deep dive. It's very complex. It requires significant amount of input and and oversight to be able to do. And then we also have Social Planning Couch, and that does the snapshots that you can find on their website. So the intent was to be in tandem, but again, we have no funding anymore, so we don't know where we're going to land in regards to big projects like that.
Follow up, Director Nicholson. You're on mute. Dr. Nicholson.
It's too bad you don't have more funding to do this. I remember when there used to be a doctor that used to come annually to the board and give us sort of a snapshot from a public health perspective. And I found that really super useful. So I definitely would encourage you to come at least annually and give us sort of a snapshot of what's going on in the Cowichan Valley. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, thank you. So Director Marsh.
Yes, thank you, Blaise. Sorry, Mr. Director Salmon, Chair Salmon. Through you to our guests, I actually have a couple of questions and a couple of observations, and then I wanted to share something that I hadn't known where to share until this morning. So my question, the Housing First for Youth, that program where you were trying to match people who live in a home that would take in a youth, did that ever take off at all? I know there was a struggle at the beginning, but I haven't sat at your table for quite a few years, so.
So that was a Social Planning Cowichan initiative, and it has incredible potential, but I don't believe that there was enough community people who were willing to take the youth into their homes. And I don't know, through the chair, if I'm able to go to Michelle from Kent. Okay. Yeah, I don't know, but what I do believe is that it was incredibly challenging to get the homes. The foundation is there and it's ready to go anytime. We just need the openness of our community. And stigma, I think, is our number one challenge.
Yeah, I suspect, I know when I offered my home to a mom with a baby, Chemainus wasn't suitable for her. Mm-hmm. And then COVID came. So I'm thinking maybe once, if this ever ends, maybe that will pick up. But the other question was the last meeting I attended on behalf of, I can't remember if it was North Cowichan or the Cbrd, Island Health was there, and the question came up whether they would work with their other ministry that manages the building code and have tiny homes zoned and approved. Did they ever get back to you about that?
I don't know about tiny homes. I know that every option for housing is on the table, and I believe that comes through zoning, through local governments.
Well, the BC building code doesn't allow them, so that's unless it's changed.
Yeah, and I have not heard anything otherwise.
Okay. Thank you. So I just wanted to note that I'm pretty sure a few years ago we had higher than average drug over death rates here. And I notice on your page that we are actually the lowest in Island Health and lower than the average in BC. I don't know about other areas of BC, but that's really good news. And I really want to thank the CAT table and you and Denise and all of the partners for the work that you've done on that. But seeing that we still have higher rates than anywhere, than the BC average, than in Island Health on depression and mood and anxiety disorders, that's sad. So I know that's not an easy thing to do because people suffering from those issues like to hide them away. And so I'm hoping that we can work on that. But, you've done so much, and I actually miss being at your table. And so I just got this idea because these just came in the mail yesterday. At UBCM, at one of the workshops, we were told that we could get these, a way of checking on people for free So I ordered 3,000 for the Chemainus area. So you put it in your window. If everything's fine when there's a windstorm or a flood or a fire, you do that. And if it's not, you do that. So you just contact the Queen's printer, Cindy.
Yes.
And you could maybe coordinate with the area directors, and I don't know how they'd get distributed. I'm going to call the Chemainus BIA. And I think it's a really great idea because, especially when you lose power, you know, it's very difficult to keep in touch with people that you might not know on your street or in your neighborhood. So that's just a suggestion. I think it would be great if we could have them for every home that wanted one in the valley. Anyway, great work, both of you.
Perhaps it's something we can do through the Elder Care Project as well for our seniors.
That's probably one of the best places, actually. Yeah, when I came back from the windstorm, I was in the mountains, and I'm sorry for my councillors who have heard this story, but I came back to this freezing house, no power, no gas. And so I happened to have a little bit of energy, and whoever I put it out on the Chemainus shout outs, and a neighbor gave me a can to so I could use my stove. And when I went up to get the little can, she said, "Would you heat this soup up for my dad? Because he just had surgery 2 days ago and we don't have any power, and they didn't have a camp stove, I guess." And that made me really think about how do we find out who might be in need during a critical, you know, a crisis of some kind.
Well, thank you, Director Marsh, for veering a little from the Q&A format, but well, thank you for that. And I'll move on to Director McGonigal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, first of all, thank you, Ms. Williams and Ms. Lise, for your presentation. Appreciate it. One of the struggles we find in the rural communities is the availability of the supportive services to come out to our communities for those who are marginally housed and in dire need of some of those supportive services. So I'm hoping that with the recent UBCM grant, that there could be an inclusion of satellite services to the rural communities that are in need of these services. Even though some of the entities in the community provide that service, it is definitely not enough for those in need. So hopefully that is one way that we can accommodate some of the funding to look at the rural areas that are not within the core that do have those supportive service and surrounding services. So if you have a comment on that, I would appreciate it.
So the UBCM grant that was applied for included the town of Lake Cowichan and the town of Ladysmith in enhanced service provision. So yes, that has been a consideration within that grant. And I believe that the town of Lake Cowichan was in the initial grant, to receive some small pod housing, safe housing. And I'm not sure whether that was approved by the local government there, but that was definitely a part of the process. So we are always thinking regionally, and at any opportunity we can to get resources. And it's really important for people who are underserved to be able to stay in their own community. That's where their connections are. That's where their families are. And it also helps take the strain off of the downtown core.
Thank you.
And a follow-up, if I may. Unfortunately, that decision has not been made at the governing level. We do have a delegation coming from CHA at the end of the month, and then from there we will decide how we move forward. But I would also echo the possibility of a yearly update from yourselves. I think that is very important, and hopefully we can continue that. Again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Well, very good. Seeing no further questions, I know we do have another delegation, but I'd just like to say thank you both very much. Very interesting and thought-provoking to see all the different things going on in our community. So thank you again. Forward to seeing you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And next, Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item D2 is a delegation. Gretchen Hartley, Executive Director, Cowichan Hospice, with a report on hospice care in the community and at Cowichan Hospice House, and this is for information.
Great, thank you, and welcome, Ms. Hartley.
Thank you. I'm now going to try and find the share video. It's an honor to be here with you all today on beautiful Cowichan territory, and I'm looking forward to showing you some slides to say thank you for the beautiful things you've made happen in our community. But where is the share button? There we go. Is that working for you folks?
No, I don't see it yet.
Let's just see.
There we go.
Thank you. Got to organize myself a little bit here. We've got an extra window that I don't need. Oh, that's not going to work. We tested this out ahead of time, but of course it's not working now.
Out the way.
Great, there we go. So yeah, you'll have noticed that Krista Fox isn't here. Unfortunately, she was called away for a family matter, and she really did want to be here to say thank you to you all as well. So there we go. So how we care for the most vulnerable at the most vulnerable times really is a measure of our compassion as a society. And these words speak to the work of hospice and really to the work of the Cbrd. This is a map showing the number of people served last year by Cowichan Hospice in communities across the region. As we all know, the population of our regional district is aging, and so the number of people who are looking for service in the continuum of hospice care continues to grow. Thanks to the wonderful support and leadership of the CBRD, Hospice House opened in November of 2020 and has since been providing skilled and compassionate care for the dying and those who love him. Of course, as you all know, Cowichan Hospice House was a dream shared by our community and worked towards together by many, many people for many years. It's beautiful and it supports excellent whole person care. Hospice House is a place where people at the end of life can now find comfort, expert medical care, and compassionate support for themselves and for their families. 60 people have been cared for in the house since this January. And throughout the pandemic, residents have been able to have visits from the people that they love. And so really the direct impact of Hospice House has been on many, many in our community. And of course, a testament to the commitment of Cbrd directors in the past and current directors. Thank you. So just a reminder on how it operates. It's a partnership between Island Health and Cowichan Hospice. Medical care is provided around the clock by a registered nurse and LPN, and residents continue to be cared for by their own physician who must commit to visiting 3 times a week. The palliative specialist physician is available as well, and many of you will know Dr. Masuda, who has remained in that role. Cowichan Hospice staff and specially trained volunteers are available to provide practical and emotional support during this very tender time. Volunteers are trained in deep listening, which is a compassionate listener can be so important as one comes to term with the final journey of their life. And volunteers provide support in other ways. Some residents wish to record their life story for a loved one. Other residents speak of how relaxing they find a therapeutic touch or Reiki treatment. And sometimes it's just a hot cup of tea and someone sitting and being in presence. In the future, programs will expand to include an evening settling program where often people are restless sometimes in the evening at the end of life. And so settling program offers music, foot massage, or energy work just to promote restful sleep. We are putting together a bit of an art bank that patients can choose from for their rooms, and visiting therapy pets if somebody doesn't have their own pet to come visit. All future plans. Already, we've heard many, many stories of the difference that the house has made. For example, the smiling woman in a wheelchair who talked to me on the way to the spa room, she said she hadn't ever expected to be able to have a good soak in the tub again. A man who said, even though he was 70, he really loved the Easter decorations in his window that the nurses had put up. And you have to know that Larry was a motorcycle aficionado and had more than a few tattoos, so it was kind of touching. More poignantly, a woman who'd lived in the Cairnsmore neighborhood for 40 years said what a difference it made to be able to be with family and friends. Her husband had died before in the depth of had died months before in the depths of the pandemic, without being able to have family visits at all. It's very sad. He was in the hospital, of course. The children's playroom has hosted some younger family members as their parents have visited with the resident, and we know that in time it will also support children whose mom or dad is a resident at the house. Here's the story from one resident. When he arrived at Couch and Hospice House, Larry Hurdle didn't know what to expect, but he said he was done, ready to die. He was exhausted from his treatments, and he was tired from restless nights and his busy 4-bed hospital ward. He was really done. But once he'd experienced the care, he said, I decided that I wanted to stick around a bit longer. He said, I wanted to enjoy it and finish my time peacefully, which he did. We heard from Darlene Vorm, whose sister Catherine died in the house, and we said that for family members and friends who are saying goodbye to someone they love, it's beyond comforting to see them in a place that's been so perfectly constructed, staffed, and managed. This place is an extraordinary accomplishment, so that's a thank you to you. Dame Cecily Saunders, who's the founder of the modern hospice movement, said how people die remains in the memory of those who live on. And we know from our work with grieving people that a well-supported death is easier on the family and leads to healthier grief. And also, interestingly, better health outcomes for the folks left behind. A difficult death can lead to a 20 to 30% increase in health care usage on the part of mourners, which is an interesting piece. Area that needs lots more research, I would say. So bereavement care is a key part of the services that Couch and Hospice offers in our community. We continue to provide care to people living with serious illness and their loved ones, not only at Couch and Hospice House, but of course throughout the community, at home, in hospital, in home care sittings, and in the community services office on Gibbons Road. With the onset of the pandemic in March 2020, we asked staff and volunteers to step up to alternate ways of providing support and ending isolation for clients, and they did. By phone, video conferencing, through conversations outside in our garden, and through support group meetings, when that was part of the public health order, that we could meet in large, airy, safe settings. So we rented some space to make that happen. Services were critical. Particularly when dying people could not receive visitors in hospital or long-term care, often until the very last hours of life. Then grieving family members couldn't gather in the normal way they would expect to gather with family and friends. And celebrations of life were put off or not held at all. So many people found themselves with layers of isolation and managing difficult grief. So bereavement care really is a vital part of the services that hospice staff and trained volunteers provide. And it's also particularly important when someone's experienced a traumatic or a sudden loss. The traumatic loss bereavement groups support those who've lost a family member to suicide, poison, drug supply, or other kinds of sudden losses. And a grieving mother shared with us that she said, I found it helpful to just be in a group of other people going through similar things. It helped me to see firsthand that I wasn't alone in this, that there were a lot of other people suffering too. There were several other parents there experiencing the same level of intense grief. Hard for people to understand unless they've been through it themselves. It's a really unique service. I consider it an essential service, part of the medical and mental health system. So important for the health of the community because it's almost important to grieve, almost impossible to grieve in isolation. You need the support of other people, and hospice gave me that. So Margaret Collin is grieving the death of her son Joshua. And one final story by way of thanking you for your ongoing support for hospice care. Leslie Sanchez writes, in December 2017, my sister Linda was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. We were devastated. 3 short years later, at Christmas time, she passed away. From the moment I walked into Cowichan Hospice, I was met with warmth, compassion, and understanding from everyone I came into contact with. I didn't feel alone. I could not have been such a support for my sister without the support given to me by my hospice volunteer. With thanks, Leslie Sanchez. Your support continues to be vital to individuals and families across the Cbrd as they face life-limiting illness and bereavement. Thank you for helping to make this support available to people when they need it most. It continues to have a deep and lasting impact on the lives of local folks.
Great. Thank you, Gretchen. Very, very moving presentation. I know a number of us toured the hospice just when it was brand new, not quite operating, and it's wonderful to see it full of people and family and even pets now.
Thank you. Yeah, and I had a final slide, but a reminder that our community services office remains open on Gibbons Road. So the anchor funding is key to those operations. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Okay, Director McGonigal, I see first. Maybe if you could take your screen down. Gretchen.
Oh, yeah, right.
I'll just wait for that, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
There we go.
So I have Director McGonigal. Anyone else? Sebring and Kuhn. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Through you, Gretchen, thank you very much for all that you do for our community regionally. I think the one thing that we forget when we look at Hospice House is the continuum of care that you spoke of throughout the community and how that is such an important part of the end of life and afterwards. I'm honored and proud to be associated with an organization that found hospice to be a worthy recipient of a significant funding opportunity that we participated in. And I thank you for the work that you do for all of us.
Thank you. Director Sebring.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Gretchen. Amazing presentation. I have personal connections to 2 people who've already used the facility and their families, and I just can't say enough. And I echo what Director McGonigal said about, being proud to be associated with a group like this that chose to fund it. Thank you for your work. I do have one question. I don't mean to be particular, but I'm going to be a little bit particular. Your second or third slide talked about usage statistics and where everybody was from, and there was a whole bunch, I think 60 or something from Duncan, and none from North Cowichan.
Oh, I'm on that. Thank you.
I mean, okay, is there a way to break that out, or because I did the slide went by so quickly? Maybe there was reference to Chemainus and Maple Bay and Crofton. I don't know, but
There was, in fact, but North Cow, when people write their address as Duncan.
Yeah, no, I get that.
Yeah, it's a very good point, because probably
a lot of people who live in North Cowichan think they live in Duncan. So, but just a heads up for future stats. That's all.
Thank you.
But thank you for your work. Just awesome. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Director Kuhn.
Gretchen, I want to thank you very much for the work you do. You're doing an excellent job. I have one question. I'm a numbers man, and so I apologize if it seems too logical now or whatever. What is the average duration of stay at your facility?
I think it's about 14 days, Klaus. I actually don't have recent stats for that, but so people, it's aimed at people in the last 6 weeks of life. And so there's been a lot of variety. One woman was there for 3 months and then moved into long-term care because she just got healthier. A couple of other people did that. But I think on average, it's a couple of weeks right now.
And how many people can you accommodate at the same time? Like how many people can stay at your place?
7 right now. So there are 3 beds that, or 3 rooms that remain available for future.
Okay. Thank you again.
Thank you. So I have Director Martman and then Morrison. Did I miss anyone? Oh, okay, Director Martman.
Thank you, and I echo the other directors and mayors in that on the work you're doing. I also appreciate the presentation coming from stories. I do like that, where you get the personal touch of people that have experienced or that you've touched through your programs. I'm interested in the volunteer part of it, and how many volunteers do you have? And is there anything that we can do to support you in gathering more volunteers if that's something that you might need? And also maybe a little bit about their training.
Thank you. Yeah, so we have, I think, currently about 80 volunteers active. The core group are people that do client support work, but we also have people who, board volunteers, of course, but people who work in the gardens, help with fundraising, those kinds of other kinds of activities. Direct service volunteers take 50 hours of basic training, really with a central focus on deep listening, although learning about palliative journey and bereavement. They are invited, encouraged, told to attend at least 1 monthly volunteer support session, which interestingly, people really liked doing it on Zoom when we switched to that in the pandemic, and the attendance went up. So it's fantastic. After, I should have said that after the kind of basic training that people do, if they want to work with clients directly, they do an apprenticeship period where they will see bereavement clients in the office, but have staff available for debriefing and support. And then we have clinical supervision in the form of those monthly meetings, but we also have an outside advisor that does periodic clinical supervision. And then maybe not finally, but also we ask people to attend at least 2 advanced training sessions a year. So they come to us with lots of skill and huge hearts, and then we really try and support good work and support good boundaries so people stay healthy and can offer the best of themselves.
Martman, that's
And
good.
just to follow, yeah, I was just wondering also, do you need any support from us, or
Yes.
could we support you in some ways?
Yes, I wonder how. We need more volunteers, obviously, because we have 2 teams now at Cowichan Hospice House, and we will be doing another training in January. So absolutely, spreading the word to people who may be interested. And I want to be frank, I think we're particularly interested in this time at looking at equity and inclusion in terms of our services. And so the more we can reach out to the whole community, the better, in terms of inviting volunteers who represent our community.
Thank you. So Director Morrison.
I don't know
Thank you.
how that might happen. So that's a good question. We just, we advertise through local media, Facebook, all that kind of stuff.
Thank you. Good to see you, Gretchen. I'm glad that you could present to us today. And I just want to note on a personal note, I'd happened to be in the at your facility when the Cowichan Lake Community Forest Co-op was making that incredible donation of $100,000 to the organization, and it was a gorgeous day, sunny out, and maintained privacy, but a fairly well-known former local government individual was in your facility and was surrounded by family and using the outdoor facilities, and it was actually it was joyful for the family to be gathering, and I think your outdoor portion of the site is almost a magical place. But my question is, we have 2 seasons here on Vancouver Island. We have the wet and the dry season. And do you have the ability, like, heaters and all that sort of stuff to make the outdoors as maybe not as usable as it would be in the summer, but as we head into the wet season, usable for folks that are making use of your facility?
So at Cowichan Hospice House, I think it's really, we added a waterproof top to the large gazebo. And so it is a question of bundling up and being a West Coaster out there to the degree that people can. At the community office, we're just building a little sheltered pergola with a heater and a waterfall for privacy, actually, because the garden has been so well used by volunteers and clients here. So both those things. But yeah, we don't have to find that balance between shelter and still being outdoors is the challenge.
Yes, thank you. So
and thank you for mentioning the Lake Cowichan Forest Co-op contribution. It's absolutely amazing. Represents a very important community.
Great. Okay, so we're almost due for a short break, but first I'll finish off with Directors Marsh and Acton. Director Marsh, please.
Yeah, I don't want to repeat anything, but Gretchen, I haven't been able to be one of your volunteers since I took on this volunteer role. But if you need anyone who's experienced that to give you some words of experience, it's the most humbling and rewarding thing to be bedside to someone who's passing from this world to the next world, and also to just be a listening companion to someone who's lost someone. And one of the most growth producer periods of my life, for which I thank you all. And so if you need someone to say what a powerful experience it is, I'd be happy to do that.
Thank you, Kate.
Yeah, I miss being able to do it now.
I'll be in touch. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Director Acton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Gretchen, thank you for remaining connected with us. I just wanted to request that you share your information on your volunteer positions and that we can share with our communities.
Absolutely. In the form of an ad, essentially a poster.
If you have anything you could send to the board or to legislative services, they'll get it to us and then we'll be able to share it with our communities in person or on our own social media. So if you've got a request happening for January, just a little bit more information that we can share, and then people can have the heads up that it's coming.
Absolutely, thank you. I just wanted to make sure that people did get a copy of our annual report in their box some months back, because it does have both the numbers that Klaus likes and the stories. And I want to say again, thank you so much.
Great, well, thank you, Gretchen. Very inspiring, very comforting to know we now have this hospice in our community. Well, thanks again. Okay, so we're at 1 hour. Why don't we have a 10-minute break, and then we will come back at 10:40 for the report.
Video's live.
Thank you, and welcome back, everyone. So we will move to the next item on the agenda, Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On to reports. Item R1 is a report from Economic Development Division on the Municipal and Regional District Tax Renewal Application. And the recommendation proposed is that it be recommended to the board that staff work with Tourism Cowichan Society in preparing a 5-year municipal and regional district tax renewal application at the current 2% level, and 2, that online accommodation platform MRDT revenues be directed back to supporting affordable housing, and that staff report back to the committee with recommendations for the appropriate use of these revenues.
Okay, thank you. So I see we have Mr. O'Riordan here, but I noticed, Director Morrison, did you want to speak? I don't know, do you have a presentation first, Mr. O'Riordan, or?
I'd like to have the resolutions separate, if I could, please. 1 and 2 considered separately.
Oh, okay, we can consider them separately, sure. Okay.
There's no presentation with the report.
All right, then we have speakers list. I think I saw Director Marsh first, and then Director Wilson, Director Morrison, and Sebring, and Kuhn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was going to move the recommendation, so I guess I could move the first. Lori's shaking no, so if people prefer to discuss it before we get it on the table, I don't mind.
Yeah, let's discuss first. And then...
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, Director Wilson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I find myself totally confused as to the recommendation here on number 2 of an additional $50,000 to $60,000 be dispersed to a function that is already well funded annually by hundreds of thousands of taxpayer dollars. I am, of course, referring to the Affordable Housing and the Cowichan Housing Association, to which Economic Development is now proposing to redirect even more funding from tourist taxation, the MRDT, towards that organization. I am well aware of the fact that affordable housing was added as a permissible use of funds in the 2018 provincial budget. However, contained within that permissible use is the clause which states affordable housing must be consistent with fiscal prudence and accountability. Given the already stated fact that the CHA is already incredibly well funded, I cannot see that the aspects of fiscal prudence or accountability have been considered. As has been the case in the past, this report, among others, has been presented to committee and industry with very little time to research and educate ourselves on the host of ramifications contained herein. I am advised that the report itself has come as a complete surprise to industry stakeholders who have had members of the EDC at their discussions with no indication being given that this proposal was even a possibility. I am therefore respectfully asking that this report be tabled or sent back so that we, the elected officials, community leaders, and tourist industry stakeholders are afforded the courtesy of sufficient time to fully study it. In support of this, I am prepared to make a definitive motion to be considered and discussed by this meeting as required. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Director Wilson, so you're making that motion now, or would you prefer to wait? Okay, so that's, sorry, is that a referral motion, or is that?
Yeah, that's a referral motion. We need time to study this. There are huge amounts of aspects here.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. You'd indicated we were going to have discussion before entertaining any motions.
I did say that. Okay, is that all right with you, Director Wilson? Can we do that first? Okay, guys, do have a speakers list. Am I right here? Morrison, Sebring, Kuhn? Is that the order? And Marsh, okay. So next I have Director Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate a little bit of latitude. I've been sort of burning the midnight oil on this particular report, and I want to speak sort of on behalf of those folks and people in the community around the affordable housing issue, but from a very different perspective than suggested in this report. I want to share some, and I granted it's anecdotal, but just a little bit of information that I've gathered recently. You all know that I'm a landlord. I ran into a gentleman at the building supply store the other day who bought a duplex or triplex in this neck of the woods, and this was for long-term rental. And the gentleman renovated the triplex, moved into one of the units, is keeping one of the units for family and friends visiting, and the third unit is for short-term rentals. So look at the inventory. That's 3 units lost there. We had a duplex on our street just sold recently. $800 a month, three bedroom duplex. In order to keep their unit, they offered the new owner 50% more rent. They went from $800 to $1,200 a month. So, we have a crisis. And what we see happening is, and this is a very difficult situation for those of us that have been here for a while. And not all electoral areas and municipalities are allowing secondary suites yet. But the entire rationale for secondary dwelling units was to increase the supply for affordable housing. And it was never intended for us to be providing commercial short-term rental opportunities for people. And that's exactly what people are doing. They're buying homes with rental units, and they're going straight into the Airbnb market. That's never what was intended. So I bring those examples forward because I've been talking to people in the tourism industry and the B&B industry and Airbnb industry. And Airbnbs in the regional district are kind of the industry's dirty little secret. The report even says they don't have good information on where this revenue is being derived from. And a lot of the people that are owners of Airbnbs that are supposed to be long-term rental, they're renting out suites and units over garages, they think that they now have a legitimacy to continue those operations because they're paying the MRDT. And so I'm just going to make a suggestion that I think that staff need to go back and look at this, because the suggestion that I'm hearing from industry and from the province is that enforcement of our existing bylaws on the books to ensure that those that are legitimately able to participate in short-term rental market can do so. But this is like we're trying to plug a leak in the dam with what's in this report when the floodgates are wide open. So I'd like you all to consider that we definitely don't endorse this. What Director Wilson said is absolutely true. We need to go back to the source of what the problem is, not throw more money at an affordable housing situation. If we could recapture some of these short-term rental units and get them back into the long-term rental market, we're doing our residents and our communities a huge favor. Because I know that in my community, people are buying homes and homes with suites, and they're not putting them in the long-term rental market. They're using them for vacation properties and income properties. And that was never the intent when we started to allow suites and additional dwelling units in our community. So please consider that. This needs way more work, and we should be putting enforcement at the top of the list of what we want to be funding in this particular question. Thanks for your indulgence, everyone.
Great. Thank you, Director Morrison. So I have 5 more: Sebring, Kuhn, Marsh, Smith, and Yanni DiNardo. I'll start with Director Sebring.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too have some concerns, particularly with the second bullet. When I read the report, second last paragraph on page 1, the MRDT was introduced by the province to provide funding for local tourism marketing programs and projects. The tax is intended to help grow BC tourism revenues visitation and jobs, and amplify tourism marketing opportunities in an increasingly competitive marketplace. And then a couple of lines down at the top of the next page, it says staff are not aware of any previous board discussions on the use of OAP revenue for tourism marketing or affordable housing. No disrespect, but duh. We haven't had any discussion because the assumption was, at least my assumption as a board member was, that the tax would go to the stuff that was allocated or that was envisioned when the MRDT was first put together by the province, funding local tourism marketing programs and projects. Like some other directors have said, I was quite shocked when I saw this. And again, I'm not ruling out the notion that maybe we want to do this, particularly in the short term, because we're in the middle of a pandemic. Do we really want to spend a truckload of money to attract tourists here when, you know, potentially we don't want any tourists? So maybe we do want to do this for this year, but this whole process concerns the hell out of me in terms of how we got here and where this recommendation comes from, which to me is totally out of left field. Not something I was ever expecting. I'm trying to wrap my head around making that connection between a tax on tourists and the housing situation. And perhaps there is a connection. I don't know, but I will definitely be supporting a motion to table for further research and discussion, because I'm not ready to vote on this one today in the way that it's. I mean, I'm ready for the first bullet that we continue to collect the tax, but I think we need more discussion on where we want to allocate that money once we get it. So that's my perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Kuhn.
Yes, I'm of a similar opinion. We have a function for affordable housing, and we are putting money into that, and sufficient money as far as I'm concerned. We should not use money that comes from tourism and funnel it into affordable housing. I don't think that's the right thing to do. I'm dead against that. I'm willing to move the motion forward, number one, but number two, I would never be in favor of. I think if it looks like we don't need the additional money, then let's reduce the fee at the venues, at the hotels. But I mean, if there is a tourist entity that collects money, then it should be going back into tourism. It shouldn't go into affordable housing. I'm not in favor of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Kuhn. So the list is now Marsh, Smith, Yanni DiNardo, and Staples. Director Marsh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I may have a misunderstanding of this, so I'm going to be asking Mr. O'Riordan some questions, but just wanted to remind the board that on page 13 of the BC Municipal and Regional District Tax Program Requirements report of 2018, the very second paragraph on page 13 says that designated recipients that wish to use general MRDT revenues for affordable housing must provide the above information in their 5-year strategic business plan, 1-year tactical plan, and must demonstrate strong stakeholder support as part of a full application. So obviously this is something that, and it goes on to talk more about it, but Mr. O'Riordan, is this the short-term rental market, or does it include the very few hotels that we actually have in the region?
Mr. O'Riordan.
Through the chair. Yeah, just to provide some clarification, the discussion here around affordable, the OAP, that online revenue, so Airbnbs, etc., is the one that was introduced in 2018. And the original intent of MRDT funding has been to support tourism marketing. But when the province included this online accommodation in 2018, it's at that point they made it an option that affordable housing could be included as a use, both for that online accommodation funds, which can be decision of the board at any time, or the general revenue, which is not for discussion here, which would need consultation with industry and it be part of the 5-year plan. Maybe
Right.
that makes things more confusing, but I'm hoping that.
No, that's kind of what I thought it meant. So if I could just clarify what I think I heard you say, that the units that could be rented long-term, that owners are choosing to rent as Airbnbs, they are applicable to this whatever tax rate between the 2% and 3%. And that the staff are recommending those owners that are taking long-term rentals out of that market and putting them into Airbnb would be taxed at 2%, and you're recommending that goes into for paying for more affordable housing. Did I get that
Through
right?
the chair, that's correct, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so I don't know if that changes anyone else's opinion, and I'm fine to send it back if we want to give staff to come back and say the same thing in a different way. But anecdotally, both in the city of Victoria and here, there is a lot of unregulated Airbnbs. One of our directors told me a couple of years ago of a tiny little house in Duncan that didn't even have a view, that was bringing in, $15,000 a year. And at that time, that was an awful lot of money for a tiny little house in Duncan. So it just seems to me that it's proper, but, I would support it. But if the rest of the board needs to have another look, I'm happy to do that. But I mean.
Okay, thank you, Director Marshall. I've got a long list here, so I'll move on to. Thank you, Director Smith.
Thank you. I think that we've just gone through a federal election, and I remember all the parties indicating that they are looking at affordable housing. The provincial and federal governments, they're the ones with the deeper pockets. They need to be stepping up to the affordable housing. Our responsibility is to look at our communities and how we can support economic development for businesses, supporting businesses. And I think I'd like to point you to the CBRD's corporate strategic plan. Number 1, our livelihoods, create opportunities aimed at building economic prosperity in our communities and for all of our residents across the entire region. Strategic objective number 1, to increase the levels of economic resiliency, security, and prosperity for residents of Cowichan region. This is important that we bring this into the conversation. It wasn't included under the report, and we have made commitments to build back better, to work towards increased employment within our communities. And if we are not having stakeholders that provide that information to bring people into the community, I mean, even locally, our communities are looking at each other. People are saying, hey, I'm not driving all the way to Victoria. I'm going to stop and I'm going to have lunch in Duncan. Or I'm going to go out to another area that's local and are supporting local businesses. And we need to make sure that there's the employment there and the businesses there, not just for lease at the front door or closed or in liquidation. We need to make sure that we're supporting all the businesses, big, small, and as a community, make sure that we're working towards economic resiliency. I'm not in support of point 2. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I think we have consensus building here. So I have Directors Yanni DiNardo, Staples, and Nicholson, and then we'll go to Director Morrison. You may have a motion, I'm guessing. Director Yanni DiNardo.
Chair, I wanted to, through you, I'd like to ask staff if daily rentals are allowed in electoral area electoral areas and where they are allowed? So in our zoning, do we allow Airbnb? I don't know which staff can. I know that in Cowichan Bay, we have just a few stilt homes, but that's the only one I'm aware of. So thank you.
So staff.
Through you,
Charles?
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Ms. Charles.
Thank you. So we do have a number of zones that do allow short-term rentals. It's primarily the C4 zone, which exists in a variety of electoral areas. We also have a number of zones that permit bed and breakfast accommodation. So if you have a bed and breakfast operation that's advertising through Airbnb, let's say, the revenues that they're deriving they're required to pay back the tax, and this is going into the MRDT. So you can have bona fide online accommodation platforms that are generating revenue going towards MRDT. So apart from that, we don't have. I would say generally in residential zones we don't permit temporary short-term accommodation outside of bona fide bed and breakfast operations where you have an owner residing on the premises. Also, just for the clarity of the committee, I wanted to make sure that everyone was aware that what we're talking about here, the online accommodation platform revenues are attributed to about 6% of the overall MRDT. So it's specifically the Airbnb, VRBO, those types of platforms which are required to contribute to MRDT. So we're not talking about general accommodation. And further to this, I think it's also important to note that Mr. O'Riordan has had extensive conversations with members of the the stakeholders of the accommodation sector, general accommodation sector, hoteliers and others involved in tourism marketing. They're generally not in support of using MRDT for affordable housing, and we don't expect that position to change. So if you are to send this back to staff, we can go have those conversations, but we don't expect to get support from those stakeholder groups towards using some of this funding towards accommodation. We brought the recommendation forward to you because we are in a housing crisis. We could have come forward with a recommendation for direction, but we feel pretty strongly that the funds are needed for affordable housing, and then that's why we've made the recommendation that we've made. If the report or the recommendation is referred back to staff, I would respectfully request that you're very clear about what it is you expect to see in a subsequent report. Thank you.
Yeah, that's okay, Director Yanni.
Thank you, Ms. Charles. Yes, I've just noticed that in my community, I know that we already pay the tax to the affordable housing because we have that function now, but we have already said that secondary suites, carriage homes were definitely in need, but I am seeing that there is a lot more value in a landlord owning one of those for an Airbnb than it is for the monthly rentals. And so I'm not sure how this is going to help out, but I will listen to the rest of the committee and make my decision. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Director Staples.
Thank you. And I feel like what I'm perhaps is missing, and just listening to what staff was just saying as well. When I read through the report, what the recommendation is talking about staff coming back to us with recommendations about what they see happening with this. That's how I am reading this. I'm just trying to get back up to this. So that staff report back to the committee with recommendations for the appropriate use of these revenues related to affordable housing is what I'm understanding this to read. And when it's great if it stays in the format that it's in, we can bring all the tourists here that we want, but if we have nowhere for staff to live and have no staff to actually be present at any of the restaurants or the facilities that people are trying to recreate and enjoy while they're here, that poses a huge problem. We already have restaurants that are cutting down their hours, and this is not anecdotal. This is something that is, you know, being written about and talked about by the community at large, because they don't have staff. And part of the reason that they don't have staff is because of the lack of affordable housing. You know, we're kind of at that pre-stage of other communities that have a larger tourism-based economy, like the Whistlers and the Tofinos, where they don't, you know, they're running into this in crisis levels all the time. So I think that for staff to present this to us in this way is actually, you know, they're taking measures to prevent this from getting worse, and seeing how we can actually work as a region to make sure that we have housing accommodation for people who work in these industries, because right now we don't. And that's a huge challenge. And so, I mean, part of what I would like to hear back based on this motion from staff is I would like to hear back, you know, the actual numbers. What are we talking about in terms of the need in terms of employees that the tourism industry is seeing in our region right now? I think that would really help inform this discussion moving forward, and the impact of loss of accommodation because of Airbnbs. I think that those are two things that I would really like to hear back before, and moving this decision to me with perhaps direction would then allow staff to do that work and bring it back to us. But this is, this I see as a preventative measure from something that we're actually already in the midst of in terms of the negative impacts on this industry.
Thank you. Okay, no staff comments on that. Numbers, I just remind everyone that in the staff report, the number for the money we're talking about is $50,000 to $60,000 a year. So, well, I have
through the chair. The only comment I would have on that is the discussions we've had to date with both Tourism Vancouver Island and Cowichan Housing Association was thus far around an idea of putting forward this fund in 2022 towards a workforce housing strategy. So looking to work with the tourism sector and tourism businesses and service industries to look at specifically housing and how that can be addressed. So teasing out those numbers that Director Staples was talking about would happen if that's the way we wanted to use these funds. Thank you.
May I have a follow-up comment?
Yeah,
Director
go ahead,
Staples?
Director Staples.
Then I would absolutely 100% support this motion based that has been presented to us by staff to do that work. I think that it is something that we need to know and we need to have a strong understanding of, and it's an industry that I believe desperately needs this right now. So I'm completely in support of the motion as it's presented based on what has been shared so far.
Great, thank you. So I have two more first-time speakers, Nicholson and Acton, and we'll go to Morrison. So Director Nicholson, please.
Thank you. Yes, I agree with Director Staples. I mean, affordable housing and the tourism sector are closely coupled, and I think this is really the way to go. We're already charging this tax, so it makes sense. What I would ask is whether it would be possible and would be helpful from a disincentive perspective to raise the online platform side of it up to the 3%, the full 3%. Would that be possible?
Mr. O'Regan?
Through the chair, I'm not aware if that is possible. I believe it, yeah, I'd have to report back on that one, but I'm not aware that that's an option.
And I guess my other question is, I think clearly this is another, from the perspective of electoral areas anyway, it's another example of an enforcement issue that we need to deal with from an enforcement perspective. So I am very supportive of this motion, both of them.
Okay, thank you. So I have Director Acton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I too support this motion. I think it feels like a no-brainer to me. On one side, it's a tax that somewhat could deter behavior. And then on the other side, it's a tax that's actually helping the sector that's being affected by this behavior. So it seems to make a lot of sense to me, and I'm sure we've all been a part of it. And I've gone to Comox and stayed in someone's carriage house, and it would have been a perfect long-term rental for somebody. It was near a school, it was a nice residential area. And so communities are suffering, and if people are coming here to enjoy the place where we live, and people who want to live here can't even do that, I think this seems like a really one avenue to approach, and we obviously should have a multi-pronged approach, as has been suggested, to go through bylaw and everything. But right now, I'm grateful that staff brought this forward, and I don't think we should be sending it back and causing more delay on something that is actually, we're in a huge crisis. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Director Morrison.
Thank you. I realize that we're talking about this $50,000 or $60,000 portion of the OAP program, and I just want to impress upon everyone here that we have a good portion of the answer already. There's built inventory in our communities. It's just been taken out of the long-term rental market. I'm seeing people purchasing recreation homes that are sitting empty for months and months and months throughout the year. I'm seeing individuals who are using their recreation properties in the early spring and in the fall so that they could capitalize on the short-term rental market in the summer, when there should be a family living in that home. There should be a family living in that carriage house. So that's where we have the issue, is that there's built accommodation. A good portion of this crisis, the answer is sitting there for us, is we have to incentivize people away from the short-term rental market, which is not a permitted use under their zoning, and make try and create the scenario where these built units are made available for long-term rentals again. And I don't see how supporting the second resolution to have a study on workers accommodation and that sort of thing. I would be more inclined to say let the MRDT amount go through to the Tourism Association, reduce our contribution from 120,000 to 60,000, and then put 60,000 into bylaw enforcement to ensure that the appropriately zoned properties can take advantage of the short-term rental market, and the properties that aren't zoned properly for short-term rental are put back into the long-term rental market. That's an innovative way to create capacity for people to find accommodation, as opposed to, well, let's study. And really, we already know what part of the solution is, and that is freeing up from the short-term rental market and getting it back into the long-term rental market. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I do have Director Wilson for the second time speakers, but I'll first, if it's okay, go to Director Stone, who hasn't spoken yet. Okay,
yeah, and just thank you, and I appreciate that. And sorry, Director Wilson, for jumping in late, but and I'm not sure, I see it as an either or conversation. I think, I'm hearing that it should be a multi-pronged approach to addressing the issue that we have with short-term rentals. Many of them will be, on analysis, I'm sure, some legitimate B&B rentals that are available on VRBO or Airbnb. And I've heard from tourism operators that they can't find housing for their staff. I lost a staff member earlier this year. I'm not tourism focused, but I lost a staff member due to affordable housing. They had to move to Parksville to find a suitable accommodation. So I think the conversation around enforcement is absolutely relevant and should be a focus of the region on how we address some of the concerns with illegitimate short-term rentals. but also recognizing that some of the short-term rentals will be legitimate B&Bs. I was kind of perusing some VRBO listings while we were here, and one of them did say, I live in the basement. If that's a problem with you, go elsewhere. Because that's the legitimate sort of parameters for a B&B operation, is that the owner lives in the accommodation. On the flip side, you can see full house rentals in our electoral areas in the region that are clearly, I'd have to check their zoning, but based on what I'm seeing, probably not likely appropriately zoned for the operation. And those should be enforced on, absolutely. It's not an academic exercise to look at the listings in Couch and check their zoning and then enforce. And I think we could give that direction to staff. Late in the conversation, Director Morrison actually introduced the thought of using the revenues to enforce, and I think that's a creative solution, but I'm not sure that's a legal use of the funds under the legislation. I think it is an either or, tourism promotion or affordable housing. So, I would just say that, perhaps there's a position here where we can look at the many prongs of an approach, and recognize also that that staff are recommending that we look at the online accommodation platform revenues as affordable housing, because those may be affecting whether they're legal or not. If it's a suite in a house and it's a legal B&B operation, it still could be long-term accommodation for people that are in need. And that need is particularly acute now, more than ever. So, I definitely support number one. Obviously, I think that's appropriate. Number two, I think that I would like to hear a little bit more about it, but I'd like to see from staff, listening to the conversation and recognizing that enforcement is an important prong of the approach to regulating B&B or Airbnb or VRBO listings within the region. So I'll turn it over to the rest of the board to hopefully we come to a wise decision. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So now I do get to Director Wilson and then Director Sebring.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this is now broadened into all sorts of things. Basically, what I'm saying here is the report itself has been presented with very, very short notice. We need time to study this. We need time to look at the ramifications again. So Director Marsh actually quoted that this use of funds should demonstrate strong stakeholder support. And I'm glad she brought this up, because as far as I understand it from EDC and from Ms. Gerolf, that TVI, Tourist Vancouver Island, was consulted on this. But for instance, I spoke to the Duncan Chamber of Commerce, and they're quite adamant that they've not been consulted about this, and they are a major stakeholder in this whole thing here. So I'm a little bit skeptical as far as the stakeholder consultation part of it is concerned. Director Morrison brought up some good points here with some really innovative ways to use this. I'm going to repeat myself here. This CHA affordable housing is well funded from us, from the province, and probably from the feds as well. Let's use the MRDT that we are collecting to help the tourist industry in other ways, and let the people who are concentrating on affordable housing do it without any further help. They don't really need it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director Wilson. So just to sum up here, I do see you, Director Smith. So we have severed these two, so I think we could probably deal with the first one easily, and then it sounds like there may be differing opinions on the second one. So to move ahead, I don't know if Director Sebring, do you want to jump in there?
Just to sort of wrap up some of the other comments, and I'd be prepared to move the first one, the first bullet on that, and I see Aaron wants to second it. But before we go to that motion, if you'll allow me, Mr. Chair, I just find, and I'm not saying I disagree with Director Morrison, but I find it really ironic that one of the things that's on the table here is to tax the temporary accommodations people so we can enforce them out of business. I mean, when you actually think about the logic of working that through, it seems a bit it just doesn't jive. Although I completely get what Director Morrison's saying. It just, yeah, it's a bit strange. But so on the first motion, I think we can all support it. On the second one, upon sort of reconsideration after hearing the discussion, I appreciate staff's request that we give them some clear direction on what we want in the report, and that depends who you talk to. So I don't know that I'd be in favor of tabling the second one when that motion is made now. I think I'd sooner try to defeat it and move on. But
okay, so but you have moved the first one and it was seconded, I believe, Director Stone? Yes. Yeah. Okay. Any discussion on that one? No. Okay. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, so now we'll go to the second one, and Director Smith, I have you next.
Yes, I was just thinking back to our earlier presentation by our Cowichan Community Health Network, and there was a 2.5 million for, and I'm not positive what exactly the 2.5 million for affordable housing. And are we, starting to look like an octopus with, this group doing one thing, that group doing something else? And I think that we aren't, we haven't had clarification on what that funding will be used for. And I definitely would not consider supporting the number 2 at this time. But I think we need some clarification on a bunch of other programs that are going on with affordable housing, because all of a sudden we've just got too many fingers going in too many directions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think, if someone would like to propose a motion on the second one, I think I saw Director Morrison first. Well, Director, I'll go to Director Staples if you don't mind. You've had 2 shots at it already.
I'd like to move the option 2, if I can get a seconder.
Okay, it's been seconded.
Because this does, and if I can speak to it, this does include staff report back to the committee with recommendations for the appropriate use of revenues. So that is included in this motion. So it's going to come back to us from staff about how this is going to look like. And I trust that staff has heard the conversation that's happened around this table.
Okay, thank you. So that's been moved and seconded. We have Director Marsh.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And again, I want to thank staff for bringing this ahead. Somebody, I think it was Mayor Staples or Director Staples, mentioned the challenges in Tofino and another area. And I know Tofino was forced to, or chose to, actually, it's probably very progressive, form their own housing association so that the businesses that attract, I think, 800,000 visitors a year in a normal year, not in a COVID year probably, could actually have staff that could live there. And in answer to Director Smith's question about the 2.5 million, and if I'm wrong, I would like to ask Mayor Staples to correct me, but I understand that's emergency housing for that includes wraparound services. We discussed it yesterday at North Cowichan, and when you look at the cost of the numbers, that works out, because of the wraparound services, to $23,636 a square foot. So that's full service housing for people in need. And if I'm wrong, please correct me, Director Staples, because I know it's coming to your city and you probably have way more information than I do. Okay, so I'm right. And so I urge the board to support this because of the reasons that Director Staples said. The staff is coming back with recommendations. So this isn't the last call. The bar is not closing down. We're going to get some more information, and we get a chance to decide based on what that information is, how to move forward. And the last thing I would just say is I love the innovative idea of, if it was possible, moving money from the tourism, but then what's going to happen to the tourism that depends on it? It looks like from Director Morrison's reaction, I misunderstood what he said, so I'll take that whole thing back. And I'm done. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director Marsh. So I see Director Martman next, please.
Thank you. And I think we're all coming from the same place, and that we're concerned about affordable housing, and we're concerned about making sure that there's a good awareness about what we might be deciding here and with other stakeholders. I look at this motion though, and I have one concern with it, and that is around we're directing funds or revenues to affordable housing and looking at recommendations. And I guess the thing is that if we don't like the recommendations, are we going to turn around and say that those revenues now go back to the to the tourism or not? So I don't know who would answer that question, because I like the idea of seeing what staff would come up with, maybe answering some of the questions from Director Morrison around bylaw enforcement, even though Mayor Sebring has pointed out that it's a circular issue there. So I don't know if that's a clear question to staff on that.
Mr. O'Riordan.
Through the chair. Yeah, I think the decision would need to be made on this by the end of October, as the November 30th is the filing application deadline for the MRDT one-year tactical plan for 2021. So should the committee want to refer this back and look for recommendations around the appropriate use of funds and decide there are none, then a decision could be made at that time to refer this back to affordable housing, as long as it's done before the November 30th deadline.
So
Okay,
follow up, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I don't know how to craft this or what the next process would be. I see Brian weighing in here, so maybe I'll leave that to him.
Mr. Brothers.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciating Director Martman's comments. The way the resolution is worded is it commits the committee to making that recommendation. I think you could just reverse the recommendation and have staff report back to the committee with recommendations for appropriate funds, for the potential for funds to be directed to supporting affordable housing, and leave it at that. And you're not committed to making that statement at the beginning of the resolution, if that fits the committee's desires.
Okay, are you okay with that, Director Staples? Okay, we can adjust that. Director Morrison, did you have a comment before I called the question? You're on mute. Dr. Morrison?
Mr. Chair,
Sorry,
could we repeat the resolution as well, just for clarity?
After Director Morrison.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, the resolution as it was originally proposed didn't make sense because we were making a commitment to affordable housing and then looking at options. I think that if it were to be reversed without a commitment to the destination of the funds, that would make more sense. And I would like to hear what the staff bring back to us. So I would support the reversed resolution without a commitment to the of a recommendation to the board that we're committed to the affordable housing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So let's just make sure can someone read what Ms. Legault, what we're actually have?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That staff report back to the committee with recommendations for on the potential for funds to be used for affordable housing.
Very good. Okay, everyone ready? I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Dr. Kuhn. Okay, motion carries. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so Next item's Ms. Legault.
No further business items, so it would be to question period if you'd like to take the recess.
Okay, 10-minute recess back at 11:41. Thanks, everyone.
Video is live.
Okay, thank you. Welcome back. So any questions from the public, Ms. Legault?
No requests to participate today.
Okay, thank you. So our next item would be motion to adjourn. Moved, seconded, all in favor? Opposed, motion carries. Thanks, everyone. Good session. I guess, do we go immediately to close board?